Welcome to LineCheck. My name is Diane, host of the local show, and this is a series of public forum events with Minnesota artists discussing various topics affecting the local art scene. Again, my name is Diane, and we've been sitting down with Minnesota musicians, artists, and friends at a look behind the scenes at what artists need to do to help build and keep their careers on track. And this past spring and into now, we've been discussing an array of topics from social media to the financial side of the music business to what it's like performing during a pandemic. And you can register for live events or catch them on the Currents YouTube channel or on a future Currents local show, which happens every Sunday from 6 to 8 p.m. with me as your host. And today, our topic is how Minnesota musicians approach art making. And creativity might be an artist's most coveted skill, especially in populous mediums such as music. At any platform, any art form where there are a lot of creators, much of it will sound or look the same. So for this particular panel, I curated a lineup of artists who defy boundaries, artists who know how to unlock sonic textures and sounds that are unique and forward-thinking, artists with big imaginations that have influenced the music scene in some way. And with me are three artists that I have worked directly with and have seen them perform live on a number of occasions. And I can speak from experience that they all possess a special talent for creativity and individuality. And I'm so excited to have them here with me today. Mankwe Ndosi, Martin Dosh, and Lady Midnight. Thank you for being here with me today.
Hi.
What's up?
Hi.
Yo.
Thanks for having us.
Some really amazing artists here. And so before we get started, I think I'd like to give y'all a chance to briefly introduce yourself and give our audience a little background of yourself as a musician. We can start with Mankwe.
Well, yeah, I'm Mankwe Ndosi, born and raised in the Twin Cities. And I don't know, I like to weave between genres. My foundation and my center definitely is sound. I like to work with textures. I'm an improvisational person. I come from theater, and I feel like my work is weaving between Black women's ritual avant-garde theater coming out of like the Ntozake Shanges and the Lori Carloses, and improvisational, textural, great Black music out of and associated with the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, a 56 now year old Black music organization rooted in Chicago, also in the Twins, also in a little bit in the Twin Cities, but in New York as well. So I like to listen to the sounds of the everyday and stretch the textures and the way that people think about singing to include all of life, all the textures of life. Let's stop there.
Dosh.
Yeah. Martin Dosh. I was actually born in LA, but I moved here when I was 2, so I grew up in South Minneapolis. And I think to the detriment of my career, I've never really been able to explain what it is that I actually do. When people say, what kind of music do you play? And it's pretty pan-genre. I love jazz music and hip-hop and electronic music, minimalist music. And so what I do is sort of an amalgamation of all that stuff. I mean, I'm primarily a drummer, and so that's kind of where everything comes from, is just the drum. But I've been doing it for, I started doing looping maybe like 20 years ago, and that completely changed my life as far as being able to do a show by myself. So I don't know. It's like, I mean, I don't really know what much else to say besides that. I love to collaborate with people across genres, and I'm just really interested in trying to make things that are new and things that I haven't heard before. And so that's sort of what I always strive to do, is like to make something that like blows my own mind. And then once I sort of have achieved that, then I'm like, okay, well, maybe somebody else can hear it. But despite having put out a lot of records and all this, over the years, it still is like every time is the first time, and it's always difficult and challenging. So that's why it's exciting to be a musician and to collaborate, is because it's always challenging. Once it becomes not challenging, then I will probably retire to the farm in Wisconsin.
I'd like to also add that Martin Dosh is our musical guest today, so look forward to that.
Yeah, that's right.
Lady Midnight.
Hi, I'm Lady Midnight. My given name's Adriana, and I'm born and raised in St. Paul from Haitian father, mestiza, Mexican mother. I identify as Indigenous, Black, and I guess initially, I think music has always been a way for me to express myself, probably more through my body than anything else. It wasn't until like after I graduated from college, where I was studying visual art, specifically photography, that I started singing professionally. So the voice is primarily what I use in creating music. And that's how I'm able to even collaborate with other people, is to explain what I'm looking for with my voice. I've been pretty fortunate to collaborate with some amazing people here locally and abroad. Trying to think, my influences just come from, I think, being alive and living in this city and being exposed to different people, family, other friends. I really appreciate DJs because they have just an obsession with finding new music and sharing it. So that's really helped me kind of expand my sense of what's possible with sound. Yeah. I'm sure you're going to get into more specific questions around how we create, but I think for me, music has always been my center, even my space for healing, my space for medicine. So it's something that I really believe in, and it's something that I share. So I usually draw from my own experiences to be able to make sense from them, like most artists. And then I share it with other people because I think that it may be of use. But I also really enjoy performing people. So I think, that's kind of my style. That was the question? Yeah.
It was just, introduce yourself, but that was
Okay.
perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, we're here today discussing the art making process with three really talented creative artists that have made quite an influence and impact over the music scene here. And let's get to the heart of it. The music or creating art. What are some of the practices you might instill as you focus on being an artist and as you're making art? Are there things, certain practices or ways that help you harness that creativity? I'll let anyone jump in.
I mean, I think for me, it's sort of trying to do something every day, whether or not it's, generally speaking, I work at night, but I think it's important to just, I sort of started obsessing about recording once I figured out I could sort of record, a drum part and then record a piano part and sort of make my own songs. I just began to get very obsessive about, not obsessive, but just had a routine where I would work every day for a couple hours. And even if it didn't seem to yield anything, I would just sort of accumulate stuff over the years and then kind of go back to stuff I had done earlier and then find new things in that. And so I think it's important to sort of stick with whatever you're doing, even if you're not totally sure if it's the right thing for that particular time, and just kind of trust your own, trust your now self, that in the future you might look back and hear something that you didn't realize was there to begin with. So I think it's just good to just work, even if it's an hour a day, if you're practicing or recording or whatever you're performing, to just keep at it. I think that'd be my number one thing.
Yeah, either of you two, what would you add to that? What practices you might instill as you're making art? Oh, I don't know if we can hear Mankwe.
No, I can't.
Oh, it's because I had muted my microphone. There it is. I think for me, it's definitely about listening, and listening closely, and listening and surrendering, really. So not trying to edit what you're hearing, but trying to listen for what part is you and what part is, I guess, the universe, really. I do a lot of composition for voice, but I do even more improvisation. And inside of improvisation, for me, close listening and saying yes. I think I get that from like theater improv. It's like saying yes, listening for the glue, listening for the music that wants to arrive or the message that wants to arrive, and the feeling in my body. And so I consider myself often a channeler. So I'm not only listening for the music as in notes, but what is the feeling coming through my body? You know, what are the textures and the rhythms congealing or forming into, or is it an expression of the chaos? So practice listening and detailed listening as well is one of the biggest things for me. And to play, I guess. Say yes and play and go outside of what is normal. So pushing back at what is supposed to be to open up to what is possible.
I was just going to retract everything I just said and just second what Mankwe said, because that's exactly what I feel too.
I actually appreciated so much what you said, because you know, I've come as mostly a self-taught artist, like not coming through music schools or anything like that, and so sometimes I've struggled to have a regular practice. Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah, I really admired like the dedication and discipline you were talking about. I don't have that as far as showing up every day to create music. I think about things and give myself different experiences. I would say that I'm always creating in some way, even if it isn't an outward product. But I think coming from a visual art background, I'm really interested in the narrative, the story, how that connects into what I'm translating. So for me, I really look at how to distill an experience or a feeling through words and sound. And it's through sometimes through the collaboration, sitting with a producer or an instrumentalist as we're creating together, that will help give me like where I'm going next. But for the most part, I think I am drawing from my own experiences and known experiences. So I would say that as of right now, it's less about drawing from like the ether, and it's more around like drawing from within myself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate all your answers to that. And I think it's art. So, you know, is there a right answer to something like this? And it can seem like such a mystifying thing to grasp. What is creativity? How do you harness it? And I want to get more into that in a bit.
Can I say one thing? Can I say one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, like what Lady Midnight was saying about the drawing from yourself instead of the ether. It's like, I kind of feel like the ether is kind of inside of yourself. You know, the ether is like something you can channel, and it's within every person. So that's, I don't know. I wish that was my statement as well. This is great.
That's what this is here for. Yeah. Beautiful. There's so much. I feel like there could be an entire book on this, and of course we're here talking about it within like an hour. And to get into, I think every artist is going to have a really good answer to this as well. Why is art important? And why is this creativity important? Why are we sitting here talking about art in a way that's unlocking it and giving it light? I'd like any of you to kind of jump into that.
Yeah, I would say a line that I always appreciated, that is not my own, but the statement that art is a safe place for unsafe ideas. And I think that it's important to be able to have places where we can look honestly without judgment, and create spaces for conversation, reflection, expression. It's what makes us human beings. So I think it's important that society has art, because that defines culture, defines so much of like our essence. As an artist, I don't feel like I have much of a choice other than to create. So, I think that that's just my role here in this lifetime. But I do think that without art, it's not, I think we lose our humanity. It's our soul. So, yeah.
Agreed, Gianna. Art is the spirit that moves the vessel. It's the wind and the water. It's all of the elements, truly. I think in sort of modern colonized society, there's a sort of a schism or a separating of art from everyday life. But in most cultures, ancient cultures, creativity, art, music, beauty was woven into every aspect of daily life. And sure, some people were more skilled in some ways or dedicated in particularly unique ways. But art was how people knew that life is, as you said, sort of worth living, and unlocks things, unlocks heart, unlocks the energies of the elementals, unlocks the connections between us and the elementals, unlocks history. And so we time travel through art, through music. So I actually think that without art, or I really seek to weave art back into daily life processes, particularly with groups. It moves through politics, it moves through resistance, it moves through walls, it moves through barriers. It's beautiful and efficient, sometimes terrible, but unlocking all of the aspects of us, all the parts of us. So absolutely crucial to existence and to transformation in the future. I mean, we need the vibration now more than ever with all of the storms that we are involved in right now. It's critical, and I think the artists at this time are more critical than ever.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's sort of with regards to music is just sort of the common denominator. I mean, I'm not like putting down visual art or anything like that, but just sort of music is the one language that everyone in the world can understand. And like, we have such a great tradition in America of music that and I've been influenced by so much different kinds of music, and so much of it is based in American and African American music and just history. And even though I'm a white dude, it's amazing to just sort of like see myself, my small little part on this continuum of American music. And even though I don't know what I'm doing in a lot of ways. It helps me sort of connect with what it means to be living in this country. And it's just, if I didn't play music, I would just be, I don't know what, I would be not a happy person. It's just, music is all there is to me, really. So.
Yeah. It's lives. It definitely saves lives. It saved my life. Mm-hmm. And I think it also like calls our spirits back in through situations and times when we're like, I'm kind of done with this place, because there's plenty of reasons to say that as well.
Mm-hmm. And Audrey, was there
your body in ways when you're
I
was going to say No, just in the same way that Mankwe was saying that it can put you back into your spirit. Your spirit can come back into your body. I think it can do the reverse, where it calls your spirit out of your body if you're in a situation where you're uncomfortable there. Like music it's a time machine. It's it's a vessel to just go wherever you want to go. So I think, yeah, it's a really powerful tool, and so is so many other forms of art, not just music. But it's what I think connects us to the eternal, art, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes we make these big fancy things out of it, but it's really every day. It's in the birds, it's in the mountains, it's in the flower. There are ways in which we are inspired as humans to do more. But it's also simply what creation has made around us.
Absolutely. And y'all are prolific, and I know that y'all also have the ability to improv. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about, Mankwe, you're talking about unlocking, and you guys are talking about, unlocking a spirit that's within you. Tell me about improv a little bit, and because a lot of people are scared of improv, and it is a scary thing, especially to do it in front of people, because you really have to bare your soul a little bit. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts about improv. Anyone can jump
All right,
in.
who's going first? Well, I'll go first, I guess. Yeah, I mean, all my music is basically, that's what it's all based on. I mean, it might sound sort of like the end result might seem like it's pre-composed or whatever, but pretty much everything I've ever done has begun with improvisation and making loops. Like when I first started to make loops, I had a little loop pedal that was maybe only like 6 seconds long. And when I started running my drums through it, and you make your first pattern and you start layering on top of that. The first time I heard it back I think I was playing through a speaker, just hearing back these 6 seconds and 6 seconds on top of that. It was like this instant gratification of just like creating something that had polyrhythms, and it's improvised, but you're sort of reacting to yourself. And so that's what I really enjoy about making loops and stuff like that is it makes you sort of go into yourself and listen to yourself in the moment, and then you create something, and then you stop and take a break and listen back to it, and the loop is still going, and it doesn't even feel like it's something that you actually made yourself. It feels like it came from somewhere else. And this is not just for looping, but it's basically like what I'm saying about improvisation. Like if you're doing looping, it's like that. With other musicians, like what Mankwe was saying earlier about listening, it's kind of the same thing. But listening is really important too. But improvisation is it's the best, and when it works in a group context or by yourself, it's just the most electric feeling, and I love it. That's kind of one of the main reasons why I'm still doing it.
I think that it means, and I'll let you hold your thoughts on improvisation because I want to hear from both of you. But I think this is a good time to jump into our music video by Dosh. This is his single, "If You Strike Me Down," pre-recorded for our LineCheck series, and we'll keep discussing more after this. music from Martin Dosh called If You Strike Me Down. And we also have a closing video from Martin Dosh. Thank you for that. And yay, thanks for being back here with me. And Dosh, give us a little background on that.
I mean, so background, I just realizing too, I'm wearing the same shirt today as I was in that video, which is kind of funny. Municipal Stadium in Cleveland. So the background for that is just, during the pandemic, like all of us, I had needed stuff to do. So I just kind of went on a rampage of recording and collaborating with people remotely. So that the recorded version of that from my record, Tomorrow 1972, is like got a bunch of other people. It's got like saxophone on it and trumpet and upright bass. The title of the song was referring to after George Floyd got murdered, there was this art that was done. I live about 2 blocks from Cup Foods where that went down. So I was down there every day, but there was this art that was in the window of the laundromat down there in Chicago. And it was a 3-panel stencil of George Floyd as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it said, the first panel was like, if you strike me down. The second one was, I shall become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. And so that's the reference to the title, basically, is just that. I thought that was pretty powerful. And so it's the last song on the record, and the record is sort of about the pandemic and about George Floyd protests and just being that close to the just intensity and, just in spite of how awful it was, just the sort of communal feeling of just being part of this neighborhood in South Minneapolis. And that's basically what the emotion of it is trying to channel, is that, essentially, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Who am I to say?
Yeah, I want to bring it back to the question of improv. And Mankwe, I know especially you're an improv artist, and I want to hear your thoughts on improving and what that experience is like.
Yes, that's my happy place, actually. Well, my happy place when I'm with other musicians or artists who are listening, mm-hmm. and not just showing what they can do. For me, I like improvisation because I can find new spaces, new territories each time that wouldn't have existed without the very particular mix of people in the moment. To me, it's sort of like a performance of life, in that really everyone is improvising every day. Mm. We have the materials of life that we've gathered, or that we've inherited, or that we've channeled, or that we embody from ancestral times. And we make choices about our lives, and we can choose. And even when sometimes the days may seem to be shaped similarly, they're actually each individual. And so the more that we can be present and listen, and work creatively within the constraints that we have, the more music and the more places that we can go. I said something about listening and not just performing, because sometimes it's like in hip hop, I spent a good portion of my, my young musician years working with textures in and out and around the South Minneapolis hip hop scene in the Twin Cities, and saw relationships between hip hop and trance making, hip hop and griot work, which I don't think is that revolutionary at this moment, as I thought. But like, there's freestyles and there's writtens, but then sometimes people are in a freestyle, but they actually bring in something that they've already written and worked on. So that's, if we take that into instrumentals or vocals, that also is what it becomes very apparent inside of an improvisation with folks who are pretty much just showing what they've worked on. And chops are fabulous. But myself, when I'm in an improvisation, I'm interested in traveling, journaling is sometimes part of it. And saying yes. And so if people come in, it's like it works. For me, it works best. And I've talked to a few other people, like when you leap and you don't know where you're going and you listen to the threads to see where your piece is, again, what the music is asking for. And when you try to like listen for what it needs to be and say yes and help that music become itself, as opposed to listening for where I can get in or where I can show that thing that I just did, or where I can parrot what someone else is doing. Now, there's a difference between adding depth to a sound that's coming from another musician and just sort of doing that same thing because you don't know what to do, or jump on someone else because you're this about the possibility of falling. So for me, yeah, improvisation gives us experience and practice flying without falling, or trusting, and even when we fall, because sometimes it does happen. You know, I've been part of plenty of improvisations that I've been like, afterwards, been like, what was that about? But then you get up, because in each moment of an improvisation, you have choices. You can do something, and if you don't like it, just stop. And listening and silence is just as critical, in some ways even more critical, inside of improvisation than the sounds that you make themselves. But together we can find really unique moments that are just like, as Adriana was saying, like help your body, your soul travel and come out and make magic.
Yeah, very beautifully put, Mankwe. Thank you. Yeah, Audrey, you write music that has a script and has a chorus and has, like, you can sing along to it, and is just still has its own beautiful input and ways. And I also know you have also this ability to be able to channel and unlock, and in the moment, this voice you have, which is just stunning. I'd like to hear you talk about your experience with being in the moment and with the music that you make.
Yeah, I have some experience with improvisation. I would say just even more publicly recently, playing with my friend Eric Carranza, who is part of many different bands, but one that he invited me to take part in last year and this year is called Yeti Steady, and they're an improvisational group, and they'll have different artists sit in with them, and I've sat in with them a few times. And I've also freestyled an album that got recorded, a mixtape called Countdown to Sunrise. So I would say, like, my experiences in that space have been really to allow myself failure. I think sometimes when you do write scripted music or you define yourself, you make an identity for yourself and you communicate to others, they're going to have their own definition of what that means. And I think for me, as somebody who creates music for my own journey of healing, sometimes there's expectations on like what I'm supposed to convey to an audience, or people have expectations of what they want to receive from me. And if you get locked into that, especially those who don't know you, who don't know any of your experiences, but they have kind of like this idea of how they want to receive you, I think it can be really detrimental to you being able to express yourself in the moment. So a lot of ways in which I have been able to put myself in a space of unlocking the voice that you were talking about earlier, is to allow myself to, I think, reside within what I know. And that even if I am failing to articulate what I know, that it be fair and genuine regardless, and to not concern myself so much with having to elevate to any particular place, because I think then, it just becomes, it's less open where things can come to you. It becomes like really siloed or like cut off. And I've gotten a couple really good like pep talks before things in life, and I kind of keep that with me. One of the things that I've been able to do to, like, I guess, combat stage fright, or even just like, whether it be in the studio or whether it be in front of an audience, is to just remember these words someone said, like, everybody is rooting for you, so you've already won. This idea that, like, people want to enjoy themselves and they are supporting you, whether or not that might be true, but to hold that feeling with you. And the other advice that I was given is to sing as if it's only you and the creator, or your sense of a higher power. So that, I think, is such a personal space that I think allows me to trust not only my voice, but that whatever needs to be said, whatever is going to be given to me, is mine to hold and to express, and to have no fear in that, because if it wasn't, it wouldn't have been given to me. So I think there's a sense of confidence, but also a sense of just permission to be fallible. And that usually in those moments, something really interesting happens. And that's when the people who you're playing with, will usually, like, it'll spark something within them. And so there's this sense of, like, trust falls, I think, that happen. At least it's been my experience when I've been improvising.
Yes.
Absolutely.
What are some things, I would like to hear from all of you on this, that you think Minneapolis, Twin Cities could use more of, or that we lack, or anything that would help boost our music community to help support artists and art fans, to make our scene flourish even more? We have a great scene, but there's always things that I think any community can, have to make it better.
I mean, I would just say more venues, more all ages venues, so that kids who are, under 21 have. I know there are places, but I mean, I haven't been to any of them really. But I think that would be a good thing. Just places that younger people can go and play shows in front of their friends. I think that would be my number one thing.
So hard, because it's a really hard time to be a musician right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to be able to live as artists, as musicians. And so, I don't know, I really would love think tanks about, or play tanks or whatever, about the money itself, like how to fund and support your life as a musician. Often, at these days, it's very expensive to live, and somehow music is worth less and less, even though it's more and more sophisticated and there's more and more of it. So, yeah, there needs to be a different math other than being the thing that brings in the money to the club to make the drinks get sold. Because, otherwise you have to travel. And so I'm also really craving ways in which we can bring the music that's often in clubs back to places that maybe don't get or hear our musics, to people who aren't necessarily going to be at the clubs, to elder homes and parks, to place day homes for folks who maybe don't get a lot of art in their lives, or a lot of creativity around them, given this culture, to hospitals, to to be woven into every day, even more than as a show, so that people can really feel how critical and crucial musicians and music is, and we can remember that art and music making has to be part of any kind of educational curriculum, any kind of life. So I think the other piece is making sure that kids can actually play music and are interested in music. So many folks are turning to just games. That I think the music needs to be reconnected to the everyday life of young people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. Like, as far as being able to provide more support for young people, for youth, I think sometimes we forget, being in the Twin Cities, how that there are resources within schools or connections. There's so many artists that live here in the Twin Cities, so a lot of them are also instructors, educators. And not to say that that's even, like that connects to every single child, but doing work outside of the Twin Cities, recognizing that there's many places that don't have a music program, that make it really difficult for youth to be able to develop those skills, to be in a position where like they're going to be able to compete with, with other artists in their scene, unless they have some type of independent access to tools or to this knowledge, even as simple as like the internet. So I also think, it's a really hard time to be an artist sometimes. We're basing our level of success off of, monetary support, or even just how many numbers, likes, follow that we have. And that just was never meant to happen, right? With art, I think music was never really meant for money. But as Mankwe has been saying, so much of art has been taken from the everyday, that it's been commodified into this special thing that we can monetize. And that's just the reality that we live in. I think there can be efforts to bring that like back into our lexicon, our everyday, but that question is like, what can we do to kind of like make the city flourish? I think this is a great place to be creative and to find collaboration and to experiment. But I would say that something that it lacks is just industry and access to industry folks who are able to kind of like connect to even like commercial success, whether it be like sync deals, or some type of marketing support to be able to reach audiences outside of the Twin Cities. Sometimes there's a bubble that exists and there's certain resources or grants, and it can create this like crabs in a bucket mentality, which really doesn't serve anybody, because there's more than enough. The idea that like there can only be one, that's a colonial view. So yeah, I think it's hard, because I feel like when you get to a certain point, it's so enticing to leave the Twin Cities to be able to make those connections elsewhere. But if there was some way to either more conferences or, I think some of those like professional development courses, or even just access that might help, that might change things. I don't know. Hypotheticals here.
I wanted to put into the mix. And I think that the musicians here often have it. I mean, artists generally have it, but just like a fire and understand that we can do it ourselves. Like, people have created their own venues. This is something that I've learned from being associated with the AACM. In the 60s, they would get together and practice every day with each other. And then they would ride bikes up and down the cities to to advertise for their gigs. And then they would put on their own gigs in some place that they could find. Sometimes it was their houses. Sometimes it was a church. Sometimes it was a storefront. even when there weren't other venues that were independent. So I think there's a little bit of fire of like, I can do this myself and we can do this together. So not even just myself as an individual, but let's do this and let's do this together and let's build a culture of yes and of, you know, and I don't want to use the word grit, but just like we can spark ourselves, we can light ourselves on fire and we can sustain our own creativity and practice. And by doing it, we make something happen and we pull the focus to the culture.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. It has been such a pleasure having all three of you here. We do have a live audience with us, and let's see if anyone has a question. I'm going to turn to my team, see if turning to you out there, audience. Do you have a question for these three amazing artists here? We got a little bit of time for it. We're here for it. I'd like to take the time to nothing at the moment, Jesse says. I'd like to take the time to thank the Minnesota Legacy Arts and Amendment Fund for their presence in the overall Minnesota music scene and making this happen. And of course, the current staff for helping put this on, and LineCheck. And again, thank you to Mankwe and Martin Dosh and Lady Midnight for being here. Support their music. It's amazing. It's online. It's in the community. They all have are live performers as well.
Yeah, I feel very honored to be here with all you guys. So it's great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, this is fun. I think when you're talking about the Legacy Amendment brings up something though. Yeah. And that Minnesota does have a tendency to support big institutions and not small ones. And so it becomes sort of a money hoarding political association kind of can turn into a money hoarding, a political association thing in terms of who is trusted and who is trustworthy. I think it, you know, it has a lot of the similar veins, similar threads and rivers to what Martin was talking about in terms of George Floyd and the difference between the image that Minneapolis or the Twin Cities had before the uprising and what we have been experiencing in the Twin Cities, particularly Black and brown and poor, disenfranchised, working class people. And I think those dichotomies also exist in terms of the environment and the mix of institutions, venues, and things like that. So that I think that places like Minnesota Public Radio and who've got a lot of money from these, you know, the legacy amendments and things like that becomes like a top-down situation as opposed to a ground-up situation. And so I think that we could do more with funding or spending money with smaller institutions, smaller even associations that aren't nonprofit institutions. So much of the world of art here is funded through nonprofits. But I just think we need to make the mix a little more lively.
Sure. I have a question from Nate. He says, what is the role of mistakes in your craft? Is there such a thing as a mistake when you're creating it? Great question.
I'm going to pause as I talk.
You want to go ahead, Lady Midnight?
Yeah, I was to say something really quick. I think if it still bothers me over and over again, then it doesn't belong there. Sometimes it's a surprise, right? But if it, like, every time I hear it and I listen to it and it just like is a thorn in my side, I just have to get rid of it.
So real.
Yeah, I often like when I would do workshops in schools and stuff like that with the looping and stuff like that. I would often start off the session by sort of talking about mistakes and randomness, and to demonstrate that, I would have I'd be on a table, and I would take a coin, like a quarter, and spin it on the table, and just record like 1 second of it as it was falling over, and then they would hear the loop one time, and I would stop it and be like, "What'd you think of that? Does that sound anything?" and I put the loop back on, and it would repeat 4 times. And once you sort of take that randomness and repeat it, it ceases to become a mistake or random, and it becomes codified. So it's like anything that's a mistake, if you do it 4 times in a row, it's not a mistake anymore. You know, I just.
And I would, jump into the mix, saying yes to what Adriana said, definitely saying yes to what Martin said, and saying that those mistakes are also doorways to places that is particularly in improvisation, to doorways that to universes that you didn't know existed. If you say yes, as Marty was saying, say yes to that mistake, particularly inside of an improvisation, and get really curious about it. It becomes, you can make that thing into music, and then it will have its own gravity and have its own texture and have its own story. So again, the details are exciting, and the details in a mistake can be both humbling and super exciting and gratifying.
Mankwe Ndosi, Martin Dosh, Lady Midnight, thank you so much for being here. And we got one more video left from Martin Dosh, and stay tuned for more line checks in the future.
Thanks so much, Diane. Good to see you both and be in conversation with both of you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Yes. You guys are awesome.